Welcome to Divine Couples. Your host, Naomi Slater, will awaken your passion, deepen your intimacy, and invite healing into your relationships, working towards accessing higher levels of consciousness in all areas of your life. Come with us on this journey to explore and experience your fullest potential.
You are listening to Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. Thanks for joining us. I am your host, Naomi Slater, and you have tuned in to Divine Couples, adding intimacy, passion, and healing to your lives. Molly KUBES was a full-time yogi turned laptop entrepreneur. She grew a $500,000 personal brand through Instagram in less than 3 years with no formal business experience. She is the CEO and creatrix of WOMB, Women's Online Mastery in Business, an online program and community for female spiritual leaders wanting to go full-time online. Molly teaches leaders how to stay in their feminine power while at the same time creating a lifestyle of time and financial freedom. Hello, Molly.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's so nice to have you on the show.
Yay.
It's super exciting. So Molly, can you tell us how you were introduced to sacred sexuality? Because I know that you have some experience there.
Yeah, so I was probably introduced to it about 5 years ago, I would say. And as you know, before I started my online business, I was really involved in the yoga community. And I also got involved in Tantra and sexuality and things like that. So I ended up meeting a few different people in the sexual empowerment industry throughout my journey in yoga. And yeah, that was how I was introduced to it. I was just always really inspired by it in the beginning because I was really involved in Reiki and energy healing, and learning about the energetics of sexuality was something that I was, really curious about. So I just started learning about it.
Yeah, so you and I have similar backgrounds in that we both came to sacred sexuality through a yoga practice. So it's very interesting to me because they're very related. And I would love to hear about your personal experience with sacred sexuality.
Yeah, so I probably discovered it, about 5 years ago, and I had a partner at the time. And before I met this partner, this was before I was had a really big spiritual awakening. All of my previous sexual partners were something very surface level in that way. Not that it wasn't a beautiful connection, but we never really went deep in the energetics or the tantra or sacred sexuality. And when I met this partner, I had this spiritual awakening a few months prior. And and we just started exploring that together as the first time. And it was really beautiful because I felt like I had met someone who was able to explore that with me too. And it was just a totally different approach because at the time I was in university, and the university especially that I went to was very heavily into partying and hooking up and all that vibe. And I was just feeling, when I had this big awakening, I was really turned off by that, and I wanted something deeper. And so this was really beautiful to meet someone where we could explore that together and create more intimacy without it just being about hooking up. So that was probably my first introduction to it.
Amazing. And you're talking about this spiritual awakening, which I would love if you could tell us a bit more about what you experienced there.
Yeah, so probably around that time, what happened was I was really involved in partying and doing drugs and all of these different things. This was a long time ago, and it got to a point where it was quite toxic. It wasn't just fun and partying. It got to a point where it was almost quite dangerous. And what happened was I had this moment where I really wanted to get out of that lifestyle and I didn't know how. And yeah, and I had this moment of prayer actually. And it was like the first time in my life that I had like really, really, truly prayed. And I ended up getting really sick like a few like days after that. And I ended up developing some gut issues where I couldn't continue to drink alcohol or binge on.
You had no choice.
Yeah. And so I had to radically change my lifestyle very fast. And what happened was I ended up finding Reiki and I found yoga. And, you know, I found this new community of people that I felt were wanting to nourish themselves rather than harm themselves. And so it was a really beautiful experience for me. So I just kind of did a total 180, started, you know, waking up early and doing yoga, learned Reiki as well, got attuned to Reiki level 1 and 2 very fast, and just started to make new friends and new connections, and stopped going out at night and partying and harming myself, and started like learning about all of these different things and purification of my mind, body, and spirit. So yeah, so that was like the beginning.
That's incredible. And it's actually quite amazing because I had a very similar experience when I was practicing yoga. And, you know, when I started out, I was smoking cigarettes. I was never a heavy smoker, but I was smoking cigarettes, and I wanted to stop because, you know, yoga and pranayama and all of these breathing exercise and smoking, they don't really go hand in hand. And I also, when I was in one of my final relaxations, I prayed for help to help me quit smoking. And that was essentially when I had my first spiritual awakening. I mean, I just received this kind of download and this tremendous energy that flooded my body. And I realized that, you know, that I had the help that I was seeking was essentially within me. And it's kind of hard to put in words, but it's so interesting that we had kind of a similar experience, you know, kind of this moment of prayer. Yeah, very interesting. So how do you feel about the modern sacred sexuality movement? I know that it's a bit, you know, a bit complex in terms of what you've experienced, and I would love to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of beauty to it. Of course, like these practices are definitely needed in our culture. However, I do feel that a lot of it has been skewed, actually. And I feel that there's a lot of, it doesn't feel as sacred as it needs to be, I feel. I feel, that it's kind of been glorified in a way that is not healthy for us and skewed to the true intention of what it means. And I think it can be challenging because I think a lot of people have really good intentions and they want to share about this. But I think that there's a lot of things that are in our culture that have influenced the way that we teach it. And it can really skew it. Like one example is like pornography. You know, I feel that pornography is like really rampant. It's like, I think porn websites are like the most popular websites on the internet. And I think that a lot of us, even if we're not watching it, because it's so like popular and it's also under the surface, it really influences the way that we approach sexuality and even sacred sexuality.
Agreed.
And I think that sacred sexuality is more energetic and isn't even necessarily just about penetration, you know? And I think that people kind of don't take that as seriously as they need to because, and put so much emphasis on the physical aspect of sex that we forget about how subtle it actually is and how subtle it actually needs to be. And that is ultimately not even about that.
Totally.
You know? And I think there's this toxic masculine power, this balanced form of power that's based off of sex, money, and power. And it's infiltrated in some of the most sacred of practices. And then we think, and it's like commodified, and we think that that is the way. And I know that was what it was like for me, the way that I was influenced. And it's not about that. It's actually way more subtle than we realize, and way more of like an inward journey almost. Yeah.
Totally. I totally agree with you. The thing is that sacred sexuality and Tantra, I mean, it's really, it's about those subtleties. It's about the energetics. It's about seeing everything in life as an expression of divinity. It's just a matter of whether or not the practitioners are living that truth. You know, if they're teaching that, or if they're just kind of using it as an excuse for sexual self-gratification, which happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
unfortunately.
Definitely. Yeah.
So what would be your advice to other women that are seeking sexual healing?
Yeah. Well, I think that be really discerning. I think it's kind of sad because I feel there's a lot of women that need like healing in this area because there's trauma. And then sometimes they'll seek help and it will like re-traumatize the situation, you know? And I think that my advice is, if you are struggling, be really discerning and trust yourself. And I think that it can be really easy to seek help in a very desperate place and just like gain and receive help out of desperation versus empowerment and inspiration.
Yeah.
So I think that know that even if you're really struggling in this space and you feel that you've had trauma, you've had these types of experiences, know that like it's not that you need to be fixed, you know? It's just like be inspired to grow versus feeling like you need someone else to fix you, because that creates codependency.
Yes.
And you want to recognize that you don't necessarily need that other person to fix you, but you feel inspired to gain insight around your situation so that you can feel even more vibrant than before. And I know that can be really easy for me to say, because I'm not in that situation right now. But if you are struggling, like know that there is if you ever feel like drained around someone that is is saying that they can fix you or that they can help you, then that's a really good barometer. And do it from a place of like being energized and trust yourself. Know that you don't need it, but it's an opportunity for growth. I would say.
I love that. I think that's a really good way of looking at it, is really seeking help from a point of empowerment and not from desperation. Although, you know, of course, it's hard to gauge that, because a lot of people seek help when they're desperate, but you do want to be able to really trust your intuition and see if this person is kind of helping you fill your energetics, or if they're just kind of draining you and making you feel like you need them. So I think that's great advice. So Molly, you are getting married.
Yay!
So excited for you. And in a previous conversation, we were talking a bit about this. So could you tell us about what you and your lovely partner are doing now to cultivate and consecrate the energy between you? You're doing some special stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
So we're doing something a little bit different. So right now we're actually practicing celibacy until marriage. And this is really big for us because when we met, we had a really strong sexual connection, and that was really a big part of our relationship. But we realized that, you know, it kind of went off balance, where it was almost a distraction, and our